Hello and welcome back to One Chord a Week. This is Andre Tonelli as always, and today's chord is going to be one of those easy ones, so this video is going to be quick and painless, but the chord is certainly worth it, so let's begin. Today I will show you the minor ninth chord, which is really a simple chord, and it of course derives from the minor seventh chord. Here's a link to that in case you haven't watched it. It's very important that you do it, either before or after this video. It doesn't really matter, but it is where this chord comes from. It's used, the minor ninth chord, in many styles of music. You'll see it of course in jazz, because the minor seventh chord and its derivatives are very important in jazz music, so the minor ninth will appear there. You'll find it in pop, of course, in rock music. You'll find it in classical music and in many other styles of music. It's a very beautiful sound, so you'll also see it in soundtracks and electronic music. It's really ubiquitous, and it's a very beautiful chord. So before we get into the sound and a few of the little caveats that we have to keep in mind when we want to use it, let's see how it's built with the formula. As you might have gathered by the name, the minor ninth chord derives from a minor seventh chord, which in turn derives from a minor triad. Here's a link to the minor triad, just in case you're really just starting out with chords. This is where you should start, okay? Minor triad. But so the idea behind the minor seventh chord, of course, is that it's a minor sound with a bit of a twist, and it comes from this formula. We have the root in C, as always. Then we have a minor third, which is 1.5 steps above the root, which in this case is E flat. This makes it, of course, minor. Then we have a perfect fifth, which is G, and this is our starting point, the minor triad. On top of this, we go to the minor seventh, which is B flat, and this gives us the minor seventh chord that I just mentioned. And then on top of this, we're going to add the ninth. Okay, and the way it's found, the ninth, is very simple, is 1 whole step above the root. So 2 steps or 2 frets on the guitar from C to D. So we have C, E flat, G, B flat is the minor seventh, and the ninth is D. And these are the notes that make up the chord. It sounds extremely beautiful, and it's just a nice, pretty chord. One thing we should be warned about before we begin with this sound section is that this is not a minor add 9 chord. Right? There are 2 different kinds of chords, and I want to make sure you understand that, especially if you're kind of new to chords. When you start learning so many chords like we have through the course of this series, which is almost coming to an end, you'll notice how many chords are very similar, and they're easy to confuse with one another. But the problem is sometimes just a tiny little difference makes a huge difference in their function. So you will actually play a chord that it's almost the same, and its name is almost the same, and its formula is almost the same as another chord, but you mix them up and it will sound like total crap. All right, so it's something you have to be mindful of. And the minor add ninth chord, and here's a link to that. Make sure you watch that if you need, further information. The minor add ninth chord is a minor chord with a ninth. But the minor ninth chord, which is the one we're looking at today, is a minor seventh chord with a ninth. Okay, so make sure you understand the difference. Minor add 9 is just a triad plus the major second or ninth, and the minor ninth is a minor seventh chord plus the major second or ninth. Okay, so it's very important you don't mix them up. And what else? Let's see. Well, the sound, as you can tell, is a very rich sound, and the reason is, as always, the ninth. As we discussed before in the minor seventh video, to me the difference between a minor triad, we turn the guitar up, and the minor seventh is that the minor seventh is a bit richer and it's a bit less minor, so to speak, if it makes any sense. So to me this is a very minor statement, but the minor seventh is a bit more ambiguous. It has a bit of an edge to it. It makes it sound a little bit brighter and a little bit less minor, to me at least. And of course, this is just my opinion, and you should actually make up your own for each chord. But maybe this will kind of help you get a feel for what I think of each chord. The minor ninth chord, you know, it's such a great chord because it keeps that edge of the minor seventh, but you also add this beautiful second, which together with the root gives you this. You see, it sounds great. And then with the seventh, you have this sound. And so all together, you know, if you just let it ring, I don't want to get too mystical about this, but you can actually just listen to this and you can hear and feel, you know, wherever the melody will have to take you, because it's a really evocative sound. So I find it really interesting. And there's not much else to say about it. One more thing, actually, if you are used to minor seventh chords, you know that in a diatonic scale, so a major scale or one of its modes, Dorian, Phrygian, and so on, all the minor chords become minor seventh chord. So if you have a minor seventh chord, you can use it in all, or to replace all regular minor chords in a major key. For example, in C major, you have C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. These are your seven chords. And for all of them, the D, the E, and the A minor, you can replace them with a minor seventh and it works. This chord is not as simple because we have a ninth, and so make sure you understand that once you add a chord to a note to a chord, you have to double check that that note is compatible with whatever position you want on the major key or the major scale. And in the case of the ninth, you can use this chord on the degrees 2 and 6, but not on the third. So again, in the key of C major, you can use this for the D, the second chord, and you can use it for the A, the sixth chord. But you can't use it on the E, because E minor or E minor seventh in the key of C will need a natural F, because C major has no sharps. But this ninth chord in E will give you an F sharp. So you can't use it in that key, all right? You have to do something else. So whenever you work within a key, make sure you understand that the extensions you use or the notes you use will have to be compatible with that key for you to use it, all right? So that's pretty much it for the sound section. And now let's move on to three fingerings so you can start right away experimenting with this. So let's see how we can play this chord. Let's begin in this usual area for us, which has the root on the third fret of the fifth string. So that's our C. Then we have our E flat or minor third on the first fret of the fourth string. And here is a bit of a stretch, all right? You kind of have to get used to that. It gets easier, of course, if you move it up the fretboard. And then with the third finger, we bar these three notes, which are on the third fret of the bottom three strings. We have the B flat here, which is the minor seventh, the D, which is the ninth, and the G, which is the fifth. So we have root, minor third, minor seventh, ninth, and G, the fifth. And this is the sound of it. It's one of my favorite chords actually when played in this voicing. So even if it has a bit of a stretch, I think it's worth your troubles. For the second position, we're moving again to a very common area for the key of C, which is the 8th fret of the 6th string. And here's what we do. We put this big old bar with the first finger, and then we use these two fingers for just two notes, all right? And the notes are C on the 8th fret of the 6th string. We play the 5th G on the 10th fret of the 5th string. And then we play 8, 8, and 8. And on the 4th string, it's a B flat, which is the minor 7th. On the 3rd string, it's an E flat, which is the minor 3rd. And then on the 2nd string, it's again a G. So it's the 5th again. And then with the little finger, we play the 9th all the way up here on the 10th fret of the 1st string, which is a D. And it sounds like this. Beautiful. And finally, let's move up all the way to the 10th fret. And we have a C here, the root on the 10th fret of the 4th string, down to a B flat on the 8th fret of the 3rd, minor 3rd. And then we have our B flat, the minor 7th, here on the 11th fret of the 2nd string. And finally, the 9th again on the same 10th fret of the 1st. And again, this is a great sound. You can move it, of course. They're all movable. I always try to give you movable positions. And one final thing before we go. Sometimes you'll see that I'm skipping a note. Usually the note you skip is the 5th. Okay, you do need the root you could skip, as always. We often talk about it in this video. The root you can skip if somebody else is playing it, but I like to play it, so I have the root. The minor 3rd is necessary. You can skip the 5th, but you do need the minor 7th and the 9th. You need the minor 7th because otherwise it will kind of fall back onto the minor add 9 chord that we talked about just a while ago. Okay, so root 3rd, 7th and 9th are key notes and you should maintain them. The 5th you can skip or you can play it. I gave you a few examples of each. All right, so let's talk about scales now. As we are approaching the end of this very long series on chords, the 1 chord a week series, I don't want to repeat myself too much when it comes to scales. And even though sometimes I do give you scales that are a bit more exotic and, stranger, this series really is about chords. So I do want to give you scales that you can use right away. Things that are simple and direct, and that even if you don't know a lot about music theory, you can get started with. And so today I will keep it very short and we'll just talk about the 2 scales that are associated with the 2 degrees of the major scale over which this chord is possible. We just talked about it earlier. You find this chord on the 2nd degree and on the 6th degree, which coincide with Dorian and minor. Okay, so these are the 2 scales we're going to look at. The first one is the minor scale, which is the most common and easier. And you'll notice how over this chord, the scale works great, and the minor scale has a very specific sound, but because of this chord, the sound's just a bit edgier and a bit more complex and a bit more sophisticated. It does seem to rub off a little bit onto the scale. So if you want to use a minor scale, but you need the little something extra, this is a great chord because it kind of emphasizes certain notes of your scale without you even having to do too much work. You can just play your minor scale, and whenever you play those 2 notes, the B flat and the D, you'll get a bit of a push, all right? And the other one would be the Dorian scale, which is the same as a minor scale with a major 6th, and you'll hear exactly what it sounds like. This note here, the A, it has that brighter, funkier, bluesier edge, and certainly something you should practice differently than what I'm doing now. You should just record yourself playing a little rhythm. You play that into a looper or maybe on a synth and you use it as a pad, and on top of it you would play the Dorian. Something like that, take it easy, go slow, don't try to impress anyone. That's not what it's about. It's about you hearing the sound of the scale over the chord. So this is it for today's video as well. Minor 9th chord, a beautiful chord. Even though this video is a bit simpler and a bit shorter probably by the time I'm done with it, you should still dedicate a lot of time to this chord because it's very useful. Sometimes the easier chords and the simpler chords are the most important ones. They're the ones that you'll find more and more often. And they serve different functions and different purposes of the very complex chords. Very complex chords, sometimes they're overwhelming and they're very rich and you want to use them for a specific thing, whereas these chords seem to blend a bit better and they seem to be more malleable because the fewer notes a chord has, the more freedom you have when you improvise and you play, right? Because the scales available to you are more. When you start defining more and more notes, then the chord becomes a bit more prominent and the scales kind of have to fall in line with the chord because they're limited. They're limited to the sounds available within the chord. This, of course, is beyond the scope of these videos, but it's something you always have to keep in mind when you study chords. You have to learn the chord, learn the notes. That's why I stress so much the formula of each chord at the beginning of each video, because I think in time you'll be able to recognize exactly what it is you're doing and exactly how you can implement it into your music thanks to the formula, thanks to knowing what sounds am I getting, what are the scales are available with that sound, and so on. But I hope you enjoyed this video and that you found it useful, and that I will be able to put together a few more videos for this series. I have a few in mind, but really we are kind of running out of chords. And that's great, because it means that if you've done your homework and you watched all the rest of the videos, you'll have already by now, you'll have a great vocabulary of chords that probably goes well beyond what most guitar players have in their toolbox. So congratulations, but I will still surprise you with a few more before we go. All right? Have a great week, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.